Very quickly then, I believe we have Gina online. Our next presentation is from CRIF, the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility, who are one of our long-standing sponsors. We do have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding between iStructy, CRG, and CRIF, geared towards resilience and capacity building in the region. So Gina Sanguinetti Phillips is going to be presenting. She is a CRIF Technical Assistant Manager and Development and Corporate Communications Management Manager of Teams. Gina, are you online and with us?
Yes. Good morning. Thanks, Shalini. Good morning, everyone. Both persons in Trinidad and those of you who, like me, are joining online. I'm very, very pleased to be here. And I'm going to talk to you this morning a little bit about CRIF and the way CRIF supports the Caribbean with its parametric insurance products, and really how CRIF can be seen as a mechanism to address loss and damage in the region. So let me just share my screen real quick. Okay, so just double checking that everyone can see.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So this cover picture is actually taken in Grenada. We were there a couple of weeks ago, so you'll be the first in the world to see it, this particular shot. But I just want to say a few words about CRIF. I may be speaking to an audience that includes persons who are familiar with it and a few persons that are not. So basically, CRIF is known as the Caribbean and Central America's parametric insurance facility and development insurance company. And in the interest of time, I'm going to skip this video, but I invite you to visit the CRIF YouTube channel, and you can view it to learn a little bit more about the work and impact of CRIF in the Caribbean and Central America. So basically, CRIF was prompted by Hurricane Ivan in 2004, which wreaked havoc in the region and affected several, maybe up to 9 countries in the region. As some of you know or may know, it caused damages and losses worth over 200% of GDP in 2 islands, Grenada and the Cayman Islands, and severely impacted several others. So following Ivan, the governments of the region approached the World Bank for some kind of assistance to set up a mechanism that could provide financial protection against natural hazard events. And 3 years later, in 2007, CRIF was established as the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. We are now known as CRIF SPC, as it was established as a segregated portfolio company back in 2014 to enable it to expand into other regions such as Central America and to provide other products. So it was originally designed to limit the financial impact of hurricanes and earthquakes. So that has now been expanded into 6 different products, which I'll mention in a second. So it provides short-term funding to support relief immediately after a natural disaster and provides products that are not readily available or very, very expensive in traditional insurance markets. Currently, CRIF has 30 members, including 19 Caribbean governments, 4 Central American governments, but we also provide coverage to private or semi-private entities. 3 electric utilities and 3 water utilities in the Caribbean are also members, as well as 1 tourist attraction. So CRIF started in 2007 with 16 Caribbean governments, has expanded. And in the last 3 or 4 policy years, CRIF has provided over $1 billion in coverage to its members to financially protect their economies. So currently, CRIF provides 6 insurance products. 1 for earthquake, which is based on the level of ground shaking that a country experiences. 1 for tropical cyclones, which is based on the wind and storm surge. And it's purposefully not called a hurricane policy because it does take into account any tropical cyclone that has a wind speed greater than 39 miles an hour. So tropical storms as well as hurricanes. So because the TC product is based only on wind and storm surge, you can imagine that countries wanted a product that would address rainfall. And so in 2013, the excess rainfall product was launched, and that provides coverage for rainfall during a tropical cyclone or at any other time throughout the year. And then our most recent products are the last three. One for the fishery sector called Coast, which takes into account losses due to wind and rain, high waves, and storm surge. So the wind and waves component acts kind of like business interruption insurance that would provide some kind of compensation to fisher folk if they're unable to go out to sea, for example. And then the electric utilities product provides coverage for electric utilities transmission and distribution lines, which are not often able to be covered by traditional indemnity insurance policies. And then the water utilities product is for those utilities and based on the losses to those facilities. So as you can imagine, both electric utilities and water utilities are heavily affected in severe weather events, and it's really critical to get those services back online to prevent further impacts to the country, to the people within the country. And so as an example, this electric utilities policy I'm highlighting just because of the potential interest in this audience on the built environment, and that the electric utilities policy provides provides coverage to these utilities to be able to get back up and running. And very often these utilities have their own disaster fund, but this insurance complements those funds. And CRIF is developing additional products for other perils and for other economic sectors. For example, it's currently developing a flood product for our larger members, including and even some non-member countries like Guyana and Suriname, because they're affected not only by flooding caused by rainfall, but also by flooding caused by runoff across the country, sometimes coming from other neighboring countries as well. We're also looking at drought, which is another peril that is important, and we're looking at developing a product for that, as well as a multi-peril agriculture product, which would look at both drought, excess rainfall, wind damage, etc., but specifically targeted to the agriculture industry. We're looking at other sectors like housing, tourism, government infrastructure, etc. So CRIF is not a static organization. It is continually responding to members and prospective members' needs and developing additional products. So as I mentioned earlier, the membership is up from 16 to 30, and we've added to our portfolio of products. And we were able to do that because we became a segregated portfolio company, which allowed us to do that. So since inception of CRIF in 2007, CRIF has made 75 payouts to 20 of its members, totaling US $358.5 million. And these payouts are made within 14 days of the event. That's a firm CRIF commitment and has been maintained. In fact, in some instances, CRIF has been able to provide partial payouts to its countries within 7 days based on their requests. And it's important to note, however, that CRIF was not designed to cover all the losses on the ground, but to provide quick liquidity after an event so that the policyholder has access to this liquidity and can use it to address its most pressing needs at the time. And where CRIF is a parametric insurance facility, it provides parametric insurance, which is based on models that take the intensity of the natural hazard event and calculate a modeled loss based on the assets at risk within the country to determine a model loss for that event. And then that model loss is then compared to the insurance policy itself to determine if it's triggered. And so CRIF is continually improving the models so that it can reduce basis risk, where basis risk is the possibility, for example, of the model losses being higher or lower than the actual losses on the ground. So we take every effort we can to reduce the level of basis risk. And we also have a technical assistance program which provides internships, scholarships to persons throughout the region, as well as small grants to community-based organizations. And we do have partnerships with a range of Caribbean organizations such as SEDIMA, CIMH, the University of the West Indies, etc. And also ISTRUCT-E. ISTRUCT-E is one of our partner organizations in the region. So CRIF fills this liquidity gap, as I mentioned, after the immediate response where countries receive, mainly goods and services such as, water, food, medicines, etc. But before long-term assistance from international development partners kicks in. So CRIF is able to fill this liquidity gap shortly after a natural hazard event. There are stories, for example, after the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, there were millions of dollars pledged to that country. CRIF's payout was there within 14 days, and months and years later, Haiti still hadn't received some of the assistance that had been pledged. So just a note on the payouts, as I mentioned earlier, it's made payouts of almost $400 million. Most recently, as some of you may have heard, was after Hurricane Beryl, where it paid $55 million to the country of Grenada, including the single largest payout of $42 million on their tropical cyclone policy following Beryl. They are the only CRIF member country who actually has all 6 of the products available. And CRIF did make payouts to Grenlec, their electric utilities company, on its policy, also to NAWASA, their water utility policy, on its policy, as well as to the government on the coast policy for fisheries. And you can see from this graph some of the uses of the payouts. So CRIF does not dictate to the policy holders what they should spend their funds on, but they do require that the recipients provide a report within 6 months. And it allows us and our international development partners to monitor what the payouts are being used for. So as expected, the majority of the payouts have been used for immediate post-event activities, such as repairing roads and bridges, repairing buildings, cleanups, etc., providing shelter, and so on. So this just gives you a sense of the range of possibilities that policyholders are free to use their resources for, or their cash or their liquidity received from CRIF. And so the first payout this policy year was actually to Guatemala on their excess rainfall policy for a rainfall event at the beginning of the policy year, beginning of the hurricane season. So just to insert a quote from the general manager of Grenlec, Grenada's electric utility company, just reflects what the purpose of providing this insurance is. They purchased this insurance and they were able to collect the payout, and they used that payout to ensure that they were able to provide their services as quickly as possible. So we say that CRIF can be a strategy for loss and damage. And it's important in this current environment, which as you know, is affected by increasing hydrometeorological events due to climate change. And parametric insurance in general, not just CRIF, can be used to address more than physical damage to assets. It can provide financial solutions for economic exposure. One of the key benefits of parametric insurance is because the payouts are very quick, the members can have access to those resources. Just a word on parametric insurance again, because it does not require loss adjusters to go on site to assess the actual damage. This is the key reason that it can make the payouts very quickly. So just a word on loss and damage. I know people have been hearing the term being bandied about, but just to remind everyone, or to get everyone on the same page, that loss and damage, as being used now in climate discussions and by the UNFCCC, it's referred to as the impacts of climate change that occur despite countries' best adaptation and mitigation efforts. So we know that no matter what, all the resilient building that you put in place, as has been discussed here, despite all the mitigation efforts that occur, natural hazards in the Caribbean are a fact of life, and there will be impacts in countries even after you put in your best mitigation and adaptation measures. And so loss and damage refers to those impacts that remain. And this is where insurance in general, parametric insurance in particular, can provide a solution to provide financial protection, because you will need access to financial resources. So I think this slide pretty much says it all, but what I really want to focus on are some of the specific elements within CRIF policies that support the increased impacts of climate change and enable countries to have even greater protection than when we started in 2007. And these are some elements that other entities could also take on board. So typically, or before 2017, if a country's policy was exhausted by a payout, that would be it. They would not be covered for the remainder of the year. So in CRIF, in 2017, CRIF introduced the reinstatement of some insured cover, so that if a payout was delivered to the country and it reached the coverage limit of that country's policy, their coverage would be reinstated for the remainder of that policy year. And that actually occurred twice this year already. In Guatemala, their payment was their maximum payment under their excess rainfall policy. So after that payment in June, at the very beginning of the hurricane season and of the policy year, their policy was reinstated to its full value. The same thing occurred with Hurricane Beryl and Grenada and its tropical cyclone policy. That $42 million payout was its maximum payment under the policy, and therefore their reinstatement of some insured cover kicked in, and they are still covered for the remainder of the policy year, which goes from June this year to June next year. Also, we instituted what we call the aggregated deductible cover, which in case the modeled loss of a particular event did not cause the policy to trigger, this could provide a small payment because we recognize that there was some level of loss within the country, and even though it wasn't sufficient to trigger the policy, it would enable them to receive a small amount of funds for them to put in place immediate remediation activities. So these are all in recognition that there is an increased likelihood of more severe hydrometeorological events occurring, and therefore these allow the policyholder countries or members to receive some kind of financial compensation from its policies. These countries make the investment every year in these insurance policies. We want to try and make sure that they are able to get a payout as necessary and as needed. There are three other policy endorsements, also reflecting the different changes in the climate and different meteorological patterns. So for tropical cyclone and excess rainfall policies, we introduced a localized damage index and localized event trigger, which basically provides coverage for intense events that occur over a small part of the country. So without these endorsements, the entire country would have to be affected by a certain level or intensity of the event. This way, with these localized endorsements, if there is an intense impact within a small area of the country, these endorsements would enable the country to get a payout under those. In addition, for the excess rainfall policies, the wet season trigger was introduced. And so you would imagine that at the beginning of the rainy season, when the soils are, quote, normal, a rainfall event could occur which would not trigger the policy. However, after 2 months of solid rain and the soils are highly saturated, that same level of rainfall could fall, but it would result in a much increased impact because of the saturated soils. And so with the wet season trigger, this would enable that policyholder to receive a payout after a period of heavy rain, recognizing that the impacts of that would be different. So in closing, CRIF is basically committed to improving the resilience of both the Caribbean and Central America to react to climate change and natural hazards, because of course, CRIF does provide coverage against earthquakes, so we're not focused completely or solely on climate change impacts. And we view comprehensive disaster risk management as an integral part of regional development. And within CDRM, we believe that CRIF and other disaster risk financing tools are a critical part of CDRM and have been encouraging countries throughout the region, both in Central America and the Caribbean, to develop disaster risk financing strategies as a critical part of their CDRM strategies. So we're actually finished, Shalini, so I would be happy to take any and all questions on any part of this presentation and anything related to CRIF.
Hi, Gina. Thank you so much for your presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Gina Sanguinetti? It was clear we understand what CRIF does. Very important work in the region. They do very important work in the region. All right. Okay, Gina, it seems... there is one question. Yes, we're passing the microphone now.
On a year-to-year basis, how by what amount does your rates go up by?
I don't have a number for you, but CRIF does pride itself on keeping the rates as low as possible. Every year it approaches the reinsurance market to negotiate a package for all its members. And even in years where For example, there have been extensive payouts, et cetera. For example, in 2017 was another watershed year where we, after Irma and Maria, we paid out significant payouts. CRIF was actually able to give a discount to its members. And recently, with the reinsurance market hardening, CRIF actually absorbed the additional cost and did not increase the premium for the member countries. But each year, CRIF and the member countries enter into a discussion throughout in the policy renewals process and presents different scenarios to the countries where they can change their attachment points and their coverage limits in keeping with their own needs and in keeping with their own budgets. And we would like to say, or are proud to say, that once a country has increased their coverage limit, they do not go backwards. And in the past few years, we have been able to secure financial assistance for premiums from the international development partners, such as the EU or Government of Canada, etc. And so even when those have been put in place and the funding is removed the next year, or the assistance is removed the next year, countries have still kept or increased their level of coverage. Even in the COVID years also, they realized the importance of investing in this parametric insurance.
Does that answer your question, sir? All right, it does. Thank you. We have one more question.
I just wanted to know, do you think that sometimes the insurance could act as an impediment to change? For example, the utility insurance that you have where you keep on replacing poles and power lines like above ground as opposed to, let's just say for new developments, placing them below ground because you know of the vulnerability of it. Is there anything that CRIF would look at in terms of trying to promote kind of innovation in the area as opposed to replacing things as is? So does CRIF actually act as an impediment, and are they things that you will be doing to, I guess, drive innovation and change?
Thanks for the question. CRIF, in addition to providing the insurance to its member governments, I mean, it does, as I mentioned, work with partner organizations such as SEDEMA, et cetera, who are also working with the member countries to put in place more disaster resilient or hazard resilient infrastructure. And that is one thing we definitely have seen in a number of countries for our, well, with recipient governments. They have put in place more hazard resilient buildings, for example, schools, government buildings, etc. Specifically with the electric utility companies, actually more so, I'd like to make a point about the water utilities product. The water utilities insurance product is actually part of a larger project that provides technical assistance to the water utilities to do exactly what you're saying, to make sure that they are putting in place, improving the infrastructure, not just replacing what was already there. Similarly, with the coast policy for fisheries, that's also part of a larger project, which is working with the fisheries industry throughout the region to put in place more sustainable fisheries practices in each country. So thanks for that, because it did give me an opportunity to say that it's not just about selling, providing the insurance.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Gina. Thanks so much for your presentation today. We appreciate it. Apologies for our delay on the schedule. We will try to make up some time for that in the subsequent presentations. Pass on my best regards to Liz, and we will keep in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, and best wishes for the rest of the day. Thank you, everyone.